Hello and welcome to the Fairbanks Year-Round Podcast. I am your host, Blake Schreckeis with the Summit Realty Group, and I am joined by Charlie Leonelli, the Chief Administrative Officer of Mac Federal Credit Union. Did I get that right?
You did. You
All
nailed
right.
it. That's
Wonderful.
I was saying it over and over. Between your last name and my last name, yeah, that's a lot. Very, very well done.
Yeah. So you were referred or recommended to come on the podcast because very specifically they said, hey, he's a great leader in the community and raising leaders up in the community, which is related to Mac Federal Credit Union, I guess, but not completely just on that. So, but before we get into any of that, again, thanks for being here. I always like to start with how you came to Fairbanks.
I am a byproduct of a military family. So my father was in the Air Force or Air National Guard out at Eielson when they started the 168th Air Refueling Wing out there at Eielson. And so he was one of the original group that kind of came up and helped build that into what it is today, an amazing organization. And I was one of 5 kids that came up. I was in high school at the time. So we moved from Glendale, Arizona, right outside, like there's just a street divided me from Glendale from Phoenix. And so a lot of people are familiar with where Phoenix is at. Glendale's on the map now with all the expansion of the Sundell, all the, I guess the Coyotes play out there, and then the big NCAA tournaments and the Arizona Cardinals have their football stadium out there.
I was thinking the actual like Coyote Animals. I was like, tell me more about this.
The hockey team. Yeah, I guess they got pulled out of there, but recently. But like all that area was kind of farmland community when I was growing up there, and now it's just part of the extensive concrete facilities or neighborhoods that are part of the Phoenix area, and so. Came up during high school. We lived out and my parents built a house out in North Pole. And so transitioning from Phoenix, Arizona to North Pole, Alaska in the very, very late 80s was kind of a shock for me. And spent the first year just griping and moaning, complaining the entire time.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, before kind of reality set in and the pace kind of gets you. It's somewhat contagious. And so I was had the mindset of trying to get out of here for college and or maybe even finish my high school back down in Arizona. My parents were smart enough to send me down for a summer prior to my senior year, kind of let me reassess the situation down there with some friends and the environment. Decided pace of life was way too fast. I mean, it was just going light speed compared to what I was now accustomed to after being in Alaska for a few years, and longed for it. I mean, there's definitely a longing for Alaska once you've taken the medicine and then you get out and you see what it's like outside of here and what Alaska has to offer. And so even as a high schooler, I realized, hey, this is a place that I want to be. And so I came back, finished my high school years here, ended up meeting my wife, and now raising a family. And my parents are still here. And I had 4 younger siblings who all kind of did the same thing I did. So they kind of had this need to kind of go out and see what the lower 48 had to offer, whether it was during college or even after college for a little bit of work, and have all come back and are all planted and rooted here with families. And
that's awesome. Yeah, it's super common, and you know this as well. It's like not. It seems like everybody. Well, there's a lot that Alaska doesn't have, and I think a lot of people you get to focusing on that. And you think these other places, whatever it is, they have this thing, whatever it is. Shopping comes up sometimes, which, whatever. I'm going to go here, live this life. And then when you're gone, this is just my opinion of the matter, is you then realize everything that Alaska had that you didn't. You were only thinking about the things that were missing. And in my opinion, obviously in yours too, it way outweighed the negatives that come with it. So was there something specific? You said the pace of life. Was there something about this area that you were like, hey, this is where I want to be, or it just didn't feel right when you left?
It didn't feel right when I left. So you get back down there and it's like this pressure to just kind of do things that almost felt unnecessary. Like, why are we creating all this busyness in our lives? Why are we creating this need to basically to fill this? It's probably prior to social media, this dopamine fill, like this hit to go out and do these things that aren't really creating any value for our lives. And so like just the distance to get places, then you had to drive fast to get there. It just, everything compounded to a point where you're able to sit back and assess and go, hey, well, wait a sec, I can I don't have to, it doesn't take this long to commute. I don't have to stand in line. I don't have people around me that are like kind of herding me to certain places. I've got autonomy to make decisions. And so like all of that is subconscious, I'm sure to some degree, but then you sit back and you reflect on it and you go, well, you know, I can be where I want to be when I want to be, a little bit, have some autonomy in the decision making and enjoy it and the freedom of space and to be able to take in everything that Alaska has. And Fairbanks isn't like so isolated that we don't have all of these amenities that are that are desires from other places in the world. Like we still have shopping. Do we have 7,500,000 square foot shopping malls? No, but but I have everything that I need. Like all of the necessities in life you can find here and plenty.
Yeah. I'd like to bring all the wives in on this matter and ask them their opinion on you having everything you need. No, joking. So it's funny you say that because we lived in, so I've moved quite a bit, but I live down in Arkansas a lot. I've got a lot of family down there. And at a certain time, we were in a small rural area, which is pretty similar. But then we moved to the bigger city. It wasn't huge, but the metro had like around 1 million people, so much bigger than here. And that busyness that you're talking about, but also the keeping up with the Joneses, which was a much heavier pressure for whatever reason. And I don't know what, like I've always kind of not wanted to be that person. But I noticed it way more being just packed around a bunch of people. I don't know why that is where, you know, you go and you see, maybe it's because in these small rural towns, you're not seeing, you know, $300,000 G-Wagons or whatever driving around. And in the big city, you're seeing those things and it just starts raising what you think you need to be for success or whatever you think in of yourself. So there was that pressure.
$1 trillion industries. Pressuring you to buy things that you don't need. And so like it's not, and it's more prevalent in the big cities. And so not only are you getting the marketing pressure because now there's more advertising feeds, there's more radio, television, social media, billboards, whatever it is, you're also getting the people, the consumers that own that.
That's an interesting thought. So before social media, if you lived in a rural area, you were much more disconnected, I would say.
You were.
Than now. So do you think that the pressure is just no matter where you live now, do you think the pressure is for this, like you're saying, this pressure to buy, basically, is it increased on our youth or just really everybody because of the social media, or do you think it's kind of about the same from what you experienced before?
I would say tremendously more on the youth now because they have everything in their fingertips. And a lot of times if I wanted to get a source of information, I was going to wait for a catalog to show up in the mail. So I don't know if you remember the days where like catalogs would show up in the mail and you'd flip through and you'd see what they had to offer. And so Glendale was still, it was a couple 100,000 at the time that I was there, but Phoenix was right on my backyard. And so I could go to some of the largest shopping malls in the world and you had everything within a 30-minute drive that you needed. But I can remember visiting cousins who kind of lived in a more rural, and so they would get these catalogs and they would show us and we talk about, you know, buying these savings for these things, but now it shows right up to your feed and your social media feed. And so
it's funny you say that because we got little girls that aren't on my kids, not just little girls roaming around our house, my children that they don't have phones and social media and stuff yet, or hopefully ever. But it was so funny that a Lego catalog came in and it's like, man, I haven't seen catalogs in forever, and they just loved it. Oh my God, they're like circling things, just like it's like, hey, every kid's gonna do the same thing. You just don't see the catalogs very often anymore, but it's so fun to just like look through and see, what am I gonna want? So, anyways, enough about that. I guess we'll move on. So, I did want to ask. So, your parents moved up here. Did you guys move a lot before that, or was this like your one big move?
I moved a little bit before that, being an Air Force brat,
right?
And so, but I don't really have much of a memory between because I spent some time in Alabama, spent some time in Washington. Arizona is really kind of where my dad was seated for a decade plus. In my formidable years before coming up here, and so this was a transition for a permanent position rather than part of the Air Force jumping like what they do in the PCS every 3 or 4 years.
So what made him decide to move up here? Was it just the job? Was it the area? Like
quality of life.
Quality of life.
Like he was able. He sat me down. I was 16 at the time. He's like, hey, here's something that you're going to get if we make this move to Alaska, bringing me in on maybe being aware of the family decision rather than part of the decision. So I didn't have, it was not a democracy by any means, but I remember some of the things that he kind of pitched to me. He's like, you're going to get to see your dad more often. And I mean, that was like the first thing right out of the gate. And I'm like, that's a huge seller. and that was true. I got to see him. I had 16, 15 years prior to that he was on deployments, or he was at TDY, or he was gone a lot, being a military dad. And so now he came over, and this was a full-time position that was a permanent position within the state. And so I got to see him, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And so it was a lot of catch up. Yeah. And so my siblings got all of that. So my siblings that were behind me, they got my dad, they got my parents as a unit. And so that was a huge deciding factor for him, was quality time with his family. And I think quality of life packaged in that, because we were going to have some space. We weren't going to be locked into gridlock of traffic. His commute was going to drastically change. I think the pay, I don't know any of the financial decisions back then, but I know that for our quality of life as a family, it just got turned on its head.
So do you remember if he or you guys came up and visited at all before?
They did. Yep. Oh, okay. So they came up. My parents came up about 9 months before. They did a little tour. Actually they met with a realtor, ended up deciding on building a house out in North Pole. And so they ended up building a house out in North Pole. And then we came up just maybe 3 months before it was finished, lived in a little apartment in North Pole, 5 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. And we were all packed in there. Got really, really comfortable. Yeah. And then moved into a new home out in North Pole. And so, and they're there to this day. So from 88, I think, until 2024 now. So yeah, and they're still out there. Yeah. And they built it for a larger family, and so now there's just the 2 of them in there, so it's a lot of space for the 2 of them.
That's how it goes. Yeah. I've had a few people in the similar situation, especially nowadays, where they're like, "Oh, we got all this space," and they want to downsize. And it's we look at the other houses, because they're like, especially when they've been there that long, they bought this place for whatever, they built this place for like a quarter of what it's worth now and stuff, and so they're looking at like buying a smaller home, and it's like, wow, that's double the price of what we paid for this nice home. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's always kind of a hard position. But the reason I asked that is because I've sold a lot of houses to people, and military makes a lot of sense. You're getting moved here regardless, if you don't have a choice, where they've never been to the area at all, and they're just, they're going to be here no matter what. So they're buying a house. However, I've had a lot of civilians move here, buy a house, sight unseen sometimes, having been here at all, and have never, ever visited. And it is so wild to me, and I should keep up better with those guys to see if they actually end up loving it. But they just have always had this dream, not only never been to Fairbanks, never been to Alaska at all, and they're just making this like huge leap. So I always found that kind of interesting. But anyway, so you've been here basically your whole adult life.
Yeah.
Most of your childhood too, it sounds like. So this feels like home for you, I assume.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah, with everybody here. Yeah, that's what I say as well. I came here freshman year or sophomore year in high school, and just between everywhere I've lived, and I moved away as well. When we moved back, it was like, I told my wife, I was like, man, I think this is home. This is where it feels like home and where you want to put in roots. But let's get to the leadership stuff.
Okay.
So I want the origin story of, because we briefly spoke about this, where you're like, hey, I didn't really set out to become a leadership guy, or, like even educationally or anything like that. You kind of fell into it. Is that
I think a lot of people just fall into it. You're good at a certain discipline or subset of a career field, and they're like, hey, why don't we stick you into a management or a supervisor or some kind of a position where now you're over people? And that transition can be very difficult for a lot of people. And because now you're moving away from the skill set that you were really, really good at, and now you're having to manage people.
Yeah. There's a thought, I forget what the principle's called, but in the corporate world, when you're climbing the ladder, that you climb and you climb and climb, and you do so good at your job that they promote you to the next level, and then you get to the level that you're not so good anymore to get to the next level. So you have a bunch of mediocre people. I'm not saying this about you. I always thought that was an interesting thing, where it's like, maybe you should just move back one level. But anyways, that wasn't the point. It just reminded me of that. So was this at Mac that you've been doing this, or I don't know anything about your work
Mac,
history?
I guess that's a good measuring stick to look at, but it seems like it kind of follows you in life. If you get into any kind of volunteer situations where you're part of a committee or a group or something like that, and then all of a sudden somebody else, there are people that are like, I'll take the role, I'll take the lead, and just go on. I'm not really that kind of A-type personality. Well, I'm kind of I'll sit back and observe, and then as things go along, before you know it, somebody is giving me like a gentle shove, or maybe pulling me out, saying, hey, you're going to do this for us. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll take that responsibility on. But at Mac, I think when you get into a larger organization, we've got about 85 employees. So part of what I love doing is recognizing, like you talked about climbing that ladder, and always happens where you get people that are real comfortable in doing their job, and then they come into a leadership role and they're mediocre at it. Mm-hmm. So how can I come alongside and partner with them to give them the tools to succeed at the leadership aspect of it? That's often difficult because you can teach. It's oftentimes you can teach the skill set, but the discipline and the mindset that goes along with leadership is often very difficult to comprehend. So I can teach you how to pound the widget into the hole, but teaching you how to motivate other people to pound the widget into the hole can oftentimes be very difficult. And that's the fear that a lot of people have. They don't want to have to try and to motivate or create inspiration for others around them.
So that's interesting. So the job itself, and you said pounding a widget into a hole or something, we'll say that's the job. So you find that teaching the job, in most cases, maybe not if you're a surgeon or something, but teaching the job itself is mechanically easy to do. Maybe it takes a long time to learn or whatever, but the steps are simplified or laid out pretty well. But the interactions with everyone around them, like what's the difficult part of leadership there?
The will to do it. So like the skill and the will, like if we look at those two, like the willingness and the ability, a lot of times people can be taught the ability. So it's going from back to grade school all the way up. So you're not going to learn it overnight, but I can break this down to basic functions. So we're going to teach you how to do whatever skill set it is. So if it's in the real estate world, like there's a lot of procedures that have to be followed. And so you're not going to learn that overnight. But if I give you basically a manual and we're going to go, hey, step 1, we're going to do this. Step 2, we're going to do this. Step 3, we're going to do this. Most people can grasp that. If I can come up with a learning style or a teaching style that you're going to be able, whether it's video based or, hands-on or, application process or that they're going to figure that out, but they have to have the willingness to step out and do that. And so oftentimes when you have skill and will, it's when you have the willingness and the skill set, when those two overlap or both are high on that index, you get people that are like superstars. They just shine. But if you get somebody that's not willing and you've kind of got to help motivate them along to change that mindset, that's the difficult part because that's just a decision oftentimes out of fear. What I find most of the time is out of fear. The expectations are unknown beyond if they ask a certain group of people or if they step into this role, and so they don't even want to go there. Where oftentimes they know if I just turn this page, I know what the next skill set is. I can often even cheat and see. I can look ahead in the manual to find out. Okay, if I study this particular application, then I know that I'm going to have the understanding of how to do this skill set.
Right. So skill and will, I like that. So I talked to a lot of business owners, and one in particular we've brought up a few times. He's like, I never cared if anybody had the ability or skill to do this job. Like that was usually the last thing I was worried about. Like it was a bonus if they did, because again, the teaching of that skill to him was the easy part. Yep. And we don't say it in these words, but the will was always like the questionable bit. So just as you said, it's more difficult. Do you find, I always hate to say it like a lost cause. Do you find that if you just don't have the will, it's like maybe don't put the pressure on, or have you found that you're able to have people develop that will to do more?
You can usually get indicators that they're willing to like step out out of their comfort zone. So but if you're getting kind of signs that they're not comfortable in doing this, then maybe it's my job as a leader to identify where they are going to succeed, and then I can put them in another role. And then, which might be a longer process to develop that. But there are a lot of people that they just want to show up, do their job, and go home. Like they don't want to be involved in the management of people or the management of those decisions. They want to just manage what they can, and they do very, very well at that. And so if you want to spend the time and try and pull everybody out, you can, but you might be spinning your wheels a lot, and dedicating a lot of time to do that. So you want to be able to identify people, shoulder tap them, and say, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something for your future if you're willing to talk." And it's uncomfortable because people settle a lot, and they find something that they're good at. They're complacent in there, and it's not saying that they're not massively contributing to society in some way or in their work organization, but to get them to stretch out of their comfort zone is often very difficult.
Yeah, I even brought this up on the phone a little bit when I was talking with you. I didn't want to get too deep because I did want to bring this up. Is how do you, I don't know. Everybody's got their own life that they want to lead, right? So, but when do you decide that complacency or contentment is okay? And when do you decide that you do need to push? And when we're talking pushing, just like you said, it's getting out of that comfort zone. And out of the comfort zone, as we're talking about it, sounds great. Or if you're like listening to Tony Robbins or whatever, like we're going to push and do great. And everyone's like excited, like, yeah, I'm going to be successful. But in reality, pushing outside your comfort zone means you're going into an unknown area that you're afraid generally, or you're just not comfortable, obviously. So it's not a pleasant feeling overall. So when do you decide? And again, you can't really force people, but when would you decide like, hey, it's okay to be content, or it's time to push out? Like, what's the balance of that?
Well, so if you and I are working together on a project or on a team, and you're confiding in me and you're bringing these solutions to me, I'm going to know that, hey, you're probably somebody that I can go to and say, hey, Blake, you've got some great ideas. Why don't we work on getting those ideas into a process so that we can push this forward and get this project moving in the direction that you want it to go? You've already thought of these ideas. So like you've created this thought process. So it's your framework. Now, if I'm a decent leader, I'm going to see that and say, hey, Blake's got these great ideas. Blake has this framework and this game plan. It's your idea. You've got all the skin in the game with it. You're bought into it because it's your idea. And then you're given kind of the leisure you're given the autonomy to test it. And if you're in an environment where you can iterate and you're not going to get punished for failure, like, hey, Blake, I'm going to give you here's the parameters that we want this to operate in. Like, you're free to try this as much as you want, as long as we stay within these parameters. And you go and you do it. And if it fails, and we come back and we sit and we look at it and we review it and we go, okay, are there things that you could do that if we were to do it differently, that you'd like to try again? And you're like, hey, like, I know that I'm talking with somebody that's giving me the ability to try it again, or to iterate it, or to make modifications and then go at it again. The trust that's built between you and I is going to be like limitless. And so like you're going to be able to come to or if it wasn't me, I mean, if it was Shelby, if you're working with Shelby, like a lot of times within spouses, you're like, hey, here's what I want to do. I kind of want your permission in pushing this forward. And they're like, yeah, let's give it a go and let's see what happens. And you're not going to get punished. There isn't going to be this, I told you it wasn't going to work. Or like you're fired or anything like that. And so oftentimes within a corporation, you don't have that kind of leadership that steps in, that comes alongside you and says, let's try this. Let's iterate if it doesn't work. Let's game plan for a second go, a third go, a fourth go, until we know that this can be refined and work. And again, I'm going to get that from you because I'm working with you. If I'm working with Shelby and Shelby's constantly, she comes in, does her job, punches in, punches out, and she's gone, and there's no, like, life's not rough. I don't have any kind of thorns that I'm sitting on. I come in, I'm happy doing my thing, and I just go home. Then I'm not going to have any kind of feedback from her that's going to give me the indication that maybe she isn't as happy as she wants to be. But if I'm talking with you and you're giving me these little signs like, hey, you think the job could be done a little bit differently, or you could be happier if this was in this, if we involved certain aspects of another department into this. So I'm going to have conversations with you, and then I'm going to help you kind of develop some framework so that you've come up with a solution for it, and then give you the freedom to try it.
I like that. So what I'm hearing is the person that's got this will, and you're seeing those signs, instead of maybe taking a project or whatever it is from them to go higher up, or doing it yourself or whatever. You're saying, hey, I'm seeing this in you. Let's water it and see where it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a very good way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other side, so Shelby, the lazy dog. No, I'm joking. No, I'm not saying that. So someone who's not giving those signs, they're content, they're doing a great job, all the things. At that juncture, in your role, do you see that's not my responsibility to make them look for these things? Or at a certain point, do you feel like, hey, maybe I should have a conversation with Shelby to be like, hey, is there some things that we can improve or something?
It's always my responsibility
Always
to
your
have that
responsibility.
conversation with Shelby. So me as a good leader, I'm going to have conversations with everyone. So I'm going to have a conversation with my team. I'm going to have one-on-ones with them all the time, and we're going to talk about the aspects of the job that they enjoy, that they don't enjoy, and then see if I can get some solutions from them on how we can make it better. And if they're always everything's good, and I'm asking back, and I'm trying to create some open dialogue about like if there were some things that could be changed, and there's no kind of stimuli coming back that needs to be changed, I might pitch a few things to see if I can get, find out, like put a pulse on, like what would the chances be of you taking this responsibility and or taking on this team to go and go this direction. And if it's just constant pushback, even though they're doing a phenomenal job and they enjoy their job, I'm not gonna try and like force it down their throat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. So we spoke about fear. So a lot of times, obviously, pushing is scary, and people don't want to push for that reason. So I like what you brought up about the safe place. So I have great parents. I've had a great upraising. I'm not blaming them for this. I don't know where it came from, but I can look back at a juncture until maybe I was like 20-ish, where I just kind of assumed people were good at things or they weren't good at things. And like sports, when you're growing up, I was like, I was never good at any sports. Well, if you look back, it's like I didn't practice any sports. So, and there are people like physical phenoms or whatever that probably do start out better or whatever. And I've come to the realization now that if you're going to get good at anything, it's silly to expect you're going to be good the first time you do something. So is this something you already spoke about it, but you're wanting to engender like, hey, when we do try these things, it's pretty likely something's going to go wrong. Hopefully not everything goes wrong, but giving that space where they're okay to have these failures, or is it, how do you go about that where you're not, I don't know, especially in businesses, burning a bunch of money, burning a bunch of corporate time or anything like that? How do you look at that?
Well, everything is a process. So I use the light switch philosophy a lot. Like it's not just going to, because we have this idea and we flip the switch, it's not going to work. The light's just not going to be on. We've got to go through this process of developing the circuitry, developing the incandescent bulb, developing the framework to hold the glass inside and reflect the light in certain ways. So like we want to offer them the opportunity to develop a process. And some of the foundation of my belief in that is that several decades ago, I spent some time working in the emergency department here at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital, and it taught me like what emergencies really are. So like you get to see that, and even the emergency department prioritizes emergencies. So there's people that are coming in there, and they're going to have, if you've afflicted with one aspect of a pain or a symptom, they're going to prioritize you over other people. So within the business world, it's very rare that we really have emergencies. We have a lot of urgent things that need to be taken care of and are compliant needs and have time frames on them. But a lot of times people will come and it seems like a massive fire in their world, and it's like, hey, this is a distraction. Like we're going to frame this as a distraction. We're going to focus on what's important and really kind of talk about like what emergent level is this and help them prioritize that. So like when we know that there's going to be a process to it, and it's rare that it has to be that there's life and death involved in any of this stuff. It puts people at ease. I mean, we're going to set limitations on the cash that we're going to go through. We're going to set limitations on the time frame that we're going to implement this process. But it's very rare that you have something that is life threat. It's not happening in my world. It's not life threatening. And so I need to like frame that for people and put that in perspective. Like we've got the ability to do this. So let's give it a go. We're not going to lose anybody. Nobody's going to get fired over this. We're not going to lose members over this or customers. In your world, if you go and try things and you lose clients, then you'd be like, okay, that's not the right avenue that we need to take. So let's go a different route. But we're trying things in a very safe place and giving people a lot of a freedom to fail, so that we can do that second go around, that second iteration, and try it again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's easy to forget, and it wasn't even in my mind now when we're talking about these things and pushing into the comfort zone or doing things. Emergencies are exceedingly rare. what people call emergencies are, like you're saying, could be urgent and need to be done. Yeah. But same with real estate. I mean, we're dealing with a lot of money. It's most people's biggest transaction, all of that. But if you look at a lot of things, I've had myself, I've done this. I've seen other agents. I've seen assistants and different things send out an email that they're so stressed about at like 9 o'clock at night because they really felt like they had to. And it's like, all right, well, maybe it's going to the title company that doesn't open until the next morning anyways, or, and I'm giving like vague examples, but you can feel like this overwhelming pressure. And what's always funny, especially if you have a deal going south and something's going wrong, like I've lost a lot of sleep for stuff like that. And I always tell my wife, she's like, basically telling me to stop stressing out, but do it in a nice way. And I know it's true because like 2 or 3 months after that transaction, I look back and I'll usually laugh about it and I'll have a funny story from it. And it's like, if I could feel what I'm going to feel in 3 months today, like I don't know how to transport that feeling and not that you want to be lackadaisical, not that you want to not give good service to your clients or anything, but laying awake in bed is helping nobody because, and nobody's arm is chopped off or, anything like that. So that's really interesting to hear. So most of the things that most people are going to be doing, the failure is going to be not that big of a deal. It's not going to be the end of the world. And it's usually not binary in a lot of cases where you have 100% success or 100% failure.
Right.
So with house sales in particular, because that's where I see a lot of these things, and I tell most people, I was like, I've never had, not even once, has someone been homeless. Maybe they've had to stay in a hotel a few nights or something, but that's not true. I did have one lady, I did let her sleep in my camper once. But that was very seldom, like generally, and she did have a place to sleep. Like nobody's like on the street homeless in the middle of a deal. Like it's not no house, nothing else. There's always like all these little things that can be changed and reformed. So and you already spoke to this, but as you're going through this process, you're supervising these things. And if there are failures, I'm assuming you're not letting them just continue to tumble where it becomes a complete abject, horrible situation.
Yeah. I mean, it's more of a controlled environment. So like
right.
you talked about how you went through a couple of situations, you were able to reflect back on it. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that wasn't as serious as it was. So we're able to do that in a quicker time frame usually. And they're able to do that, knowing that, or building on it basically, so that once they've made that failure and we talk about it and we go through what, if it was a complete failure, because sometimes it is a complete failure.
It does happen. And
that's part of the experiment that can happen. I mean, you can try something, and if you don't try forward motion with it, you're never going to know how it's going to, like all these pressures that you put on, the stresses that you put on it are going to have it react. So if it is a failure, we're able to go through another iteration of it, but they're able to do what you did in 3 months in a couple of days and go, okay, this wasn't as bad. I didn't have everybody in the organization coming down on me. I didn't have the members coming down on me. I didn't have our regulators coming down on us. Like there's a very safe environment to do it in. And so you can build on that once you step out of your comfort zone and you say, okay, I was fearful at the beginning. We tried it. It didn't work. I was able to get coached through this and even have other peers come alongside and say, now you get more people involved in the process and help building on this. And then that person is able to take that, reflect on that in a really quick time frame and go, okay, I was scared. I'm not, I shouldn't have been scared. I'm able to walk through that really fast now. And so the next step can often be even larger. So like it's that first small step. Okay, wasn't as bad as I thought. Now I'm going to take a great big step, and hopefully it's going to go, I'm going to get the same kind of feedback if it fails again. And then I'm going to be able, before I know it, I'm running with all sorts of different things. And then you got either, and that's when you look around and you're like, well, obviously that person's now a leader because now they have a whole team that's following them.
I think so. We've talked a lot about failure and the fear of that and how you can kind of push through that. Something that's come up with me and probably a lot of people is actually the fear of success, which I think is realistic. So again, when I first got started in real estate, I remember going to listing appointments, or where you get an appointment to list someone's house for sale. And I would be relieved when they didn't pick me. You know, that feeling of like, well, because I was new and I didn't know I think it still comes back to that fear of the unknown at the end of it. But I almost, and if you asked me, I would have said I wanted the listing. Why would I go on the appointment if I didn't want the listing? Yeah. But there was still like every time I was like, oh, now I don't have to go through the whole process it's this big unknown thing that I don't really know what I'm doing or whatever it could be. So have you experienced that as well, or has that not come up as much?
Well, we try and be humble in our victories for sure. I mean, that's one way to frame that or to look at that. So if you know that you're going to be gracious in these defeats and then you're going to be humble in those victories.
No way. Yeah,
and so that's, part of it is that a lot of times when you have massive success, especially from teammates, it's almost like parenting. You see a teammate just achieve certain things, and if they're trying to deflect attention back to you, like this was all like you were willing to step out, you were willing to take on this responsibility, you were willing to take on these risks. So just be super humble in that success. I mean, it's tagged. You kind of you're like guilty by association, which is a good guilt to be associated with because other people are succeeding and they know that you were part of that team and helping building them up. And so I think that's how you. If it wasn't you, like you didn't get selected, like you are, that you're a part of that, that winning team that made it work.
Perfect. So I think you've said this in generalities, but I want to put a nice line on it. We'll say, so if you are an employer, we'll start with them, employee, not employer, and you're hungry to move up and to maybe gain more leadership or just move up the ladder, however it would be. What are some broad steps that you would say to ensure that, hey, you get noticed and you can move up?
Yeah, well, I would hope that I would like to say the people that are important are paying attention. So like can just showing up as the biggest step you have to take. And so if you can, in this day and age where it seems like it's really challenging to get talent to show up and then repeat the process the next day, show up, do your job, repeat the process the next day. Like if you're able to do that, day in and day out, it doesn't take long, whether it's through attrition or other people. Like if we're in an area where you've got people that transition out of roles, that because you're there so frequently and you're a part of the team, you're bound to get noticed. I mean, 1,000 employees, you're bound. The right people are going to see you. But I would say the first aspect is showing up, doing the job, and then repeating that. Like that's often the most difficult thing. And so it's not that you've got to come up with the greatest ideas. It's not that you've got to be the best volunteer, volunteering to be on certain leadership groups or committees, to head up, to make decisions. I think it's those two factors, especially at young age, and you're like when you're just getting started in your career. If you show up and you do your job, and then you repeat that process,
I think that's pretty natural.
Are going to recognize you.
I'm glad you brought that up because it just reminds me. My daughter we've been doing better about her unloading the dishwasher, and she's like, "Oh, I did this like all week. I did it yesterday," and I remember saying, life is pretty much full of doing the same things over and over again. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that. I thought you were going to say like, hey, keep pushing forward. But
I remember it must have been in the 90s sometime. I was at I think it was Kmart that was here at the time. And I walked by a bumper sticker and it said, life is run by those who show up. And I thought, how, like even back then, 30 years ago, like that's and we see that as employers with having, because you've got every employer out there is going to have an entry level position, and then you're going to move up through management. And so oftentimes you'll recruit outside, but if you're one of those people that shows up, does a good job, and repeats that process, I can point to dozens within our organization that did that and are now managing other people's or managing other departments.
Well, that should be good to hear, everybody, because that's not that hard to do. I mean, it can be hard.
You wouldn't think it's hard to do, but it is extremely hard to do.
In practice, it can be more difficult, but it's not a complicated thing to do, I guess. It's a simple thing, although it could be difficult, especially depending on the job. If we're talking like hard labor jobs, that is also can be difficult for people. But I do remember when I first got licensed in real estate, the big reason I pointed to success, and my broker told me this, is just answer your phone. It's like, well, that seems pretty easy. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? He's like, that's what you're supposed to do. A lot of people don't do it, though.
A lot of people don't do that. Yeah.
So,
break it down the basic building blocks. I mean, I think about, I've got a couple of brothers that are in the, one's a union worker with the electricians, and another one that's an electrical engineer. And so they talk about like different projects that they work on. And even my sisters who are in other career fields, it's like getting people to show up. So if you're in like a laborers union and then you show up every day, eventually you're going to get the call, you're going to be put on a job, and then you show up, and that supervisor, that superintendent's looking at you and like this kid, because they're young at that point in time, continues to show up and do a good job. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
And it's really short in the grand scheme of things. If your career is, say you come right out of school and you're going to work right out of high school and you're in some kind of a trades field or a laborer's job, that you're going to do that for a really short period of time before you're picked up. And then before you know it, you're going to be my age and you're going to look back on it like when you had your client and you thought, well, I shouldn't have been so scared about that. I mean, time is going to go by fast. You're going to think it's just a small percentage of time that you got to put in early on to build that. So you develop this character and people recognize the character. And then once they shoulder tap you and bring you up, and then then you got to continue to show that character. But that's your character gets you there, and then it also keeps you there.
Yeah. So sometimes I feel you don't want it to be combative, but sometimes employees or managers and like the employees or the people being managed, again, it's not, I don't want to say combative, but sometimes they're a little bit at odds of what they want. So you'll hear employees being like, I don't know, they expect too much of me. I'm doing everybody's job or whatever it could be. And you'll hear managers like, I can't get people to show up and just do the job and all these things. So how, as a manager or an employer, what are you instituting to make people, I guess, want to show up or make it a little easier? Like I hate to say culture. We can just say the culture, the culture of the business that engenders people to want to do more of this. Because obviously, if you've got a really sucky culture, people don't want to show up and they don't want to do anything for you. So it is a very big impact. So what are some things that you do or the overlaying to make it where people want to be there and they want to do their best?
Hopefully what we're doing as an organization is putting that out so the community already knows that, so that people, when we're in the recruiting process, they're already wanting to come because they've heard about our culture. And so if it's just an applicant that's just has through a firewall and just trying to find a job, then we're going to have to build that. But we want to make sure from day one, so our onboarding process from day one, we want to make sure that we're showing what our culture is and getting them to buy into, like, hey, here's who we are, here's what we do for the community, here's what we do for our members, and here's what we also expect from our employees. And so it's just communication back. So if you're transparent with your communication and it's clear, and then we're also going to want to empower that employee to have a voice so that they can at least talk about some of the challenges that they might have and hopefully provide solutions. So it's blameless problem solving. So like there's an avenue for you to come in right from day one, and we're going to give you a platform that you're going to be able to make suggestions on how we can change, but we want a solution in that. And so that allows for that dialogue to start. And then we can make sure that those pages, the employees page and the employer's page, line up. And when those pages line up and we're talking on this about everything that's on that same page, it's the culture is wonderful.
Yeah.
And so when you can see if in that communication, if those pages don't line up, it's clear to identify the gap. And then we can say, okay, now we're going to coach on this gap. Like we're going to build on, here's where we're at, here's where you're at, or here's where where you see us, and here's where we see you.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think it's really common to have a huge gap between employer and employee. And it seems, and this is my opinion, you can rebuttal this. It seems the bigger the organization, the easier it is for that gap to happen. Because if you've got a little team, you've got a small business and there's three of you, and you're seeing each other every day, it seems like, again, things could certainly go wrong. The reason I bring this up, so my mom is an HR director for multiple like bigger companies with multiple locations and things like that, hundreds of thousands of employees. And again, it's from her speaking about it, it feels very combative in a way. And Mac is maybe not the branch that you're at. I don't know how much you oversee, but it's a pretty big corporation. So how do you keep that distance from separating people out, not just between you and the employees, but just like everybody? It feels like the relationship could get thin or non-existent.
Yeah, it's that telephone game aspect. So the more layers you have, the more complexity you bring, and some complexity just destroys kind of culture.
Right.
So if you can remove those layers, not have a completely flat organization, but if you've empowered whatever layer it is to have a voice to talk on behalf of management or leadership or whatever that is, and you've given them the ability to talk, and also what we're trying to really implement with ours is a lot of quality time with employees. And so if we're not putting the quality time into the employees, they're gonna think that we don't care. And the moment they think that we don't care, they're not bought into our system. They're not bought into what we do, and they don't believe in like who we are as an organization. So they're going to find an organization where they feel like what they believe and what they want to contribute to society aligns. And so if we're not talking, I mean, it's people still. So like we can have processes and we can have technology, but people develop that technology. People develop those processes. And so we've got to get back to, we need human beings to show up and do the job. And so we need to talk to them through a human content. We need to have the ability to sit down and talk, and on a regular basis before they need it, not after they need it. Because if we're going to them after, then we're trying to play catch up. So we got to be very proactive from the beginning to talk to them and make it very frequent, and know that that we care, because the moment they find out that we don't care, or they believe that we don't care, they're going to be gone.
And it's never ending either. I think a lot of people could think I had this great conversation with even a singular employee or the company or whatever, and everybody, we get it. And it's ongoing. Like the culture thing is always like culture can shift really quickly. Depending on, especially if you bring in new people that maybe don't quite fit, or again, you don't see someone for 2 years in your corporation or whatever it is, the feeling of, 2 years ago we felt like you cared and now we don't, it's like, oh, we had this great conversation 2 years ago. Wasn't that enough? So I do find that kind of interesting, but did you have anything else you'd like to add about leadership in general?
Well, I was going to say, if you know your framework, so part of leadership is that you're not going to keep everybody. I'm hopeful that if you're part of an organization, you know that there's only going to be one president. There's only going to be one chief executive officer. There's only going to be so many executives at the top. So that's that pyramid that kind of gets formed. And so if you've got a glutton of leaders that are coming up, you're going to lose a lot, and you're going to want to promote them out. So they're going to go on and succeed elsewhere. And so as those people leave, you're going to have to recruit other people. And so if you're doing a good job of recruiting, the culture thing can be a little bit easier, but oftentimes you can't keep up. So that's why it feels like you're in this treadmill.
Yeah.
But as part of the process, you really want to find people that you're going to grow, and you're going to be their floor at some point in time. You don't want to always keep the lid on them. You've got to develop them enough where they're out on their own and they're doing their own thing, and often and almost always, if they're really good, it's not going to be within the organization that you're in, because you just don't have the capacity to
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah. So that is interesting, because I feel like a lot of, again, I'm not trying to make anybody sound negative, but a lot of companies, their goal is to hire you. This is what people feel like, I should say. This isn't always the case. Their goal is to hire you, to get the most work out of you for as little amount of money, and you to be there forever. I think that's a lot of people's feelings when they get hired, which is not great. And I'm sure there's companies that do that. But again, actually from my mom, because she's in the HR world, she sends me this book to read, and I wish I could remember the name. It was really good. It was talking about that exact thing, is knowing your time frame in someone's life, as a business, your time frame in their life. So they talked about Chick-fil-A. So Chick-fil-A is really known for, basically everybody who's ever worked at Chick-fil-A loves Chick-fil-A. They had a great experience. It seems from the outside. I never worked there. My mom did actually though, and she loves it too. But they obviously know that when we hire someone at 14, 16 or whatever, they're not going to be here for the rest of their lives, unless maybe they do move into a manager owner role. But for the most part, 99% of them won't be. However, they still invest very heavily in all of their employees. They do college. They help with college in some ways. I don't know all their programs, of course, because they just have this basic understanding is as much as we can give this person to go to their next thing, it's going to pay us back dividends in the hiring process and the recruitment and everything. So it's interesting to hear you say that. So you're not going to get to keep these people forever. Is it hard? Is that hard? Is that hard to be like, hey, because what it could feel like, and I think a lot of people do feel like, is I'm putting a lot of time into somebody who's not going to benefit me anymore. This, it doesn't feel that way.
No, I know that. I know that I'm not going to be able to keep everybody. I know that the only way that we're going to be able to keep everybody is if, money is limitless, and, then it's devalued to a point where it's not worth anything. So we've got to be able to keep things in perspective, knowing that, hey, we've got 85 employees. We're probably going to be around 85 employees for the significant amount of the future that's in front of us for the projected amount of time that we're kind of laying out, like how many branches, how many locations do we want to be in. And so we're going to be capped on unless people retire, quit, or I mean, it's rare that you fire somebody from, and especially that's a good manager. So they're going to get promoted out. They're going to get guerrilla recruited. Somebody's going to come along. Some real estate company is going to come along and say, "You've got the personality and the character to kind of to be super successful at this particular career field." And so they take the risk and they go out and they do that kind of stuff. But we want that from people. So if we know that that's the process, we know that, one, we're going to have an employee that's going to be here. We're going to invest in them. They're going to give us 100% every day. Like we want that from people. And then as they launch out and go and succeed in other career fields in the world, or at other financial institutions, in other leadership positions, that hopefully we've done enough to hold them forever as a member. So, I mean, we still, part of our business model is that, you know, we're going to facilitate a relationship with members who are wanting to deposit money with us or borrow money from us. And so, that's a daily occurrence. So like in the real estate business, you might buy 3 houses in your lifetime. And so if you get them every 16 years or something like that, that's nice to have. But if we have them on as a daily consumer, if they're no longer an employee, but we've done what we needed to do on our end to like have them really buy into believe in what we're doing, they're going to want to be a part of that from a member perspective rather than an employer's perspective.
So with that, from the employee side, I've been, again, just like growing up and whatever it is, the culture of America, however you want to say it, is loyalty was such a huge thing. Like getting a job and working there for 30 years, which is, I think, a lot of like maybe more factory style work where you're there and you retire and the company takes care of you. That can still happen. It seems less and less likely. I've now kind of swung the other way, and maybe you'll disagree with me, as to where I almost feel like everyone should always be looking for a job to leverage their skills to that next level. And again, maybe you would say, no, that's not the way to go about it. But if you are skilled, and I'm not saying this about Mac, you can get undervalued in the company you're at, where you can go somewhere else and maybe you're getting a 2% or 5% pay raise every year where you're at, and you can get a 20% pay increase to this company. And you can, in fact, I've seen it many times where they come back to the same company they were at before and have that same pay increase. Anyways, what are your thoughts
pandemic,
on that?
That was one of the biggest factors in promotions or like salary increases, because your skill set was valued in another organization. And so you kind of played the field a little bit and looked out there to see what was available, got an offer, came back to your original employer, and they either matched it or increased it. And so we want to be proactive in doing that. We can't always do that, so that we've got to know that there's a business model that we got to operate in. But we also I want you to be working on your skill set. Like it's part of that whole process. I know that we're only going to be able to keep so many people in management positions as we go up. So 85 employees, we're going to have 20 career positions out of that. So that other 65, it's going to be stepping stones for people. And so if we can help develop them along the way, and if they do launch out, and if we've done what we can and we've invested everything we can into them, they're going to leave on very good terms. They're going to tell a lot of people that the reputation with us is formidable with them. And so it might come back and pay us sevenfold just based on the membership that they send our way, because they're giving us good feedback in circles of influence that they're around.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. I guess. Yeah.
So that's a yes.
I'm with you.
I would love to be able to hold on to everybody, but still, we're not going to be able to.
I guess why I bring it up and why I'm a little conflicted is because it still kind of feels wrong, if I'm being honest. Like I think if you are feeding your family and you're making your income and you have a specific set of skills and you can leverage those skills to more income for yourself, all those things is like, that is great. But on the other hand, I do feel like, man, this Mac has treated me so well. You know, if I was in that position where it's like, God darn, yeah, I'm going to get paid better. Maybe Matt couldn't match or whatever the situation. Now I'm leaving, even though the role that they have for me would still fit. You know what I mean? Like there's some of that guilt that still comes with it. Am I off base here? And just
I don't want you to stick around for obligation. Like if if your family is going to be in a better financial situation and you're still going to be treated well.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just part of the business. That's unfortunately that's part of the business decision that goes into it. But if we can be creative, and I can come up with some kind of a scenario where we can create a financial package that maybe rewards you in different aspects of that we're able to, that don't show up on the bottom line right now on the financial statement. So there might be some things that are projected in the future, and you're willing to hang around, and we've built enough trust with you that you're willing to give us that kind of longevity kind of commitment.
Right.
Then hopefully we're going to come around and make good on that.
Right. No, I get that. I don't know. It just so kind of sits a little weird. And I'm in a position where I don't job hop because I'm self-employed, and it's a very different. And I haven't been an employee in a long time, but again, it's probably what I would do, but I still have this like a little bit of guilt where it's like, I don't know, like something is owed to the employer in a way, but maybe I don't know, maybe it should always be an equal exchange where you can. It's
semi-contractual. Like you're showing up to give me 8 hours a day. I'm contracted to give you this much money.
Right.
So beyond that, I mean, that's really just kind of, I mean, it's almost a crude sense of way of it explaining it, but the organization. So if you step back and you remove the people, the organization, that's the contract that they want. But the people, like, I want you there. I want you to be part of my team. I want you to be committed to us. And so if I'm operating on, if I've got a team and I've got coworkers that are implementing the same kind of thought process to their team, that if one of the three legs of the stool, if I can get two of the three legs of the stool that you can be as an employee happy with, then I'm probably going to keep you. So if that's the team you're working with, you just enjoy the team that you're working with. Two, you feel like you're producing something, you're contributing to a cause that you find value in. And three, the money that we're paying you. If I don't have two of those threes, you're going to go. If I've got two of those three, I'm probably going to keep you. If I've got all three of them, golden. Yeah.
And I do think sometimes people think financial is the only thing, and most of us are working for the money. However, there's been multiple cases where I've talked with people, they could move positions without getting too detailed. We'll just say move positions or something, and they know they would make more money, but it still wasn't worth the move to them because of we'll say in this particular case was the people around that person. I like where I'm working. I'm happy here. I could make more money somewhere else, but I don't think I'd be as happy. And, maybe that decision wouldn't be the same if he was starving to death or something, but he's like, I make enough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think everyone always thinks money is the end all be all of everything. And it's not always.
No, I've got a brother that's tried to recruit to have people work up north outside doing hard work for significantly more money than we're able to pay somebody that's working with us. And they're all, I have not yet been able to convince anybody to go take that job that pays 4 times what I'm willing to pay.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because when we, so funny enough, myself, I have a sister and a brother. We all got married in one summer. We ended up having kids within like 3 months of each other as well. So it was kind of cool that happened. But it was interesting to see all the different like money choices made. So my brother was a pipe fitter, welder, and for the union, and he would go away for long periods at a time, and he made way more money than I made. And then same thing, my brother-in-law was in the military, and so they moved all over the place, and he got deployed and all the different things. And I remember seeing them, and I'm the youngest, and I was like, I don't want to be gone. I don't want to be gone. So it was that same thing. I made way less money than both of them, but I got to be home kind of thing. So it was always a fact. Not that they did anything wrong. I'm not, if they listen to this, sorry. But they do get to stay home now with their life. But it's one of those things that you do have to make money. The job, in my opinion, you do want to love what you do. And pushing for that, there's nothing wrong with that. But money is always a consideration, but it cannot be the only one, because I think that's where you get to, and that's what I was trying to talk about, even with the switching of the jobs. I guess where I don't want to be is I don't want to just be greedy all the time, and where you get to this, you know what I mean?
You'd be unhappy.
Yeah.
I mean, you really would be. Yeah, you'd have less money, but and it's going to buy you certain things, but it's not contributing to the factor, or
Yeah.
a happy, whatever the metric is for measuring how much money you have to make, where now you are happier. And I know there's studies that are done on that, but what I think it does is money helps buy certain things that alleviate some of the stress.
Exactly.
So it makes you less stressful. Yeah. Whether or not you're happier, I don't know.
Yeah. It used to be, I think it was like 72,000. I assume that has gone up, where they said your happiness, quote unquote, like you're saying, I think it's also just less stress, is kind of capped with the money side of things, which I found to be true too, where when we were first starting out, getting married, having kids and stuff, we had no money and I was way more stressed. But then you make more and more, and I'm not trying to brag on myself here, but you just, as you go through life, you make more money generally. But if myself, when I was 19, could look at what I'm doing now, I would be like, I can't believe I made it, kind of thing. But now you're in it and it's kind of like, it's just normal, and you're pushing for the next thing. So it's easy to kind of lose sight of where you've come from and where you're at.
But one of the wonderful things about that struggle, because you learn so much from the struggle.
Yeah.
And so you can reflect and say, hey, we were able to do this on this amount of money back when I was 19. We can make these decisions again that can alleviate some of the stress, increase some of that money that you're holding on to, spend in other areas, whether it's kids, college, savings, whatever it is. Yeah.
Again, if we could just if we could live our life as if we're looking at it from 20 years in advance, I think we'd be way less stressed and way happier. Because as I look back at those times, I was so happy. Even though I was still stressed, it's like I really was still happy. We had different concerns and different issues, but having a nicer car or whatever, the things around me don't really change too much of that. And again, I've had a pretty easy life. I'm sure some people look back like had really dark times. I'm not saying that, but if we could all just kind of look at where we're at and realize that, you can push for the next thing and you can stretch, like what we've been talking about when you were gaining that next level. But you can't lose sight of everything you already have.
Right. So, and oftentimes when you stretch, that doesn't necessarily mean more money's coming. It might mean a little bit more stress, but how are you going to manage it? And then you're going to be able to look back on it and go, hey, I was able to manage that. And
you bring up another
good
point. So when and I kind of brought this up a little bit, but I find if I'm not stretching, I'm not as happy as I could be. But then you can overstretch, like you're saying, where that's the balance point that I have the toughest time with, where from sun up to sundown, I'm busy doing stuff. And then after so long, I am exhausted from doing stuff. And then I retract and I just think to myself, I want to go live on a beach or something, whatever it could be. So how do is it just seasons of your life where you're, kind of pushing and kind of contracting a bit?
It's that oxygen mask in the airplane theory.
Okay.
So you got to make sure that your oxygen mask's on first. So you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. If you're not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of anybody else. So like if you're overlooking that, and that's often what happens is people overlook taking care of themselves, whether it's exercise, diet, whatever kind of recovery time, or, an activity that rejuvenates them, helps you focus on whatever that activity is. And so everything else that you're stressed about kind of goes away. And so you're filled with other thoughts and clarity and that kind of stuff, so that you're able to get refreshed, so that when you come back to the things that are stressful, the work that you're trying to contribute to that is draining you, your battery's charged.
Right.
Or your oxygen mask is on. You're able to breathe at that O2 level that you need to. And if you're not doing that, then it's going to take somebody else. You're not going to see it. And then it's going to take a Shelby or a coworker that's going to have to come alongside and say, hey, Blake, you've got to, like, you're burning the candle at both ends, or you're in the grind too much. Like, you've got to step away from this and get a refresher. People take, some people take sabbaticals, some people take a lot of time off, step away, but generally that comes because the burnout is there. So I think we talk a lot about work-life balance now, but if you look at it, like, I got to make sure that I'm putting my own oxygen mask on first, so that I can be 100% refreshed and able to contribute what I can to my team. Because if I'm not there for my team, then they're going to see it,
right? And
then their batteries are going to get drained, their buckets are going to get drained, whatever it is. If I'm not there for my family, they're going to see it. Like, you've got to make sure that you're doing things. It's not a selfish thing. It's just and you got to be able to find that balance. But you've got to be able to take care of yourself, and that's got to be a paramount decision in your life.
Yeah, I can say I've never found that balance yet. So I usually bounce back and forth. So we'll have to figure it out at one of these points. But I think it's a tough one, and it's always, I don't know. It's been a through line of my life of where it is this push and pull of, like, I've got to expand my life, just in a general sense, expand this part of my life or that part. And then again, the burnout comes, but then the other end is if I don't do enough, I have this guilt that comes from like, I'm not doing what I should be doing. And I've got one life, I've got a limited time on this planet. You know what I mean? Like all these like, confusing pressures that I haven't found that middle point, I guess, yet.
No, you might. That's where you need your pocket of people to come around you and say, hey, kind of help maybe hold you accountable to certain things and make sure that you take those steps, especially if they see things in your life that are working.
Yeah.
And they know, hey, like Blake, you're going to want to go back and feel like you're not doing enough over on this end, but you're really like, that's not where your efforts need to be concentrated. I need you to keep focused over here. Trust me that this is going to work. You're going to be able to, you do this for 6 months, you'll look back and go, I don't know why I was spinning my wheels doing that other thing or feeling the pressure of doing that.
Yeah.
But oftentimes you got to be vulnerable enough to really let people breathe into you and tell you that, like get to a spot, like it might even be you saying, hey, I need you to be this in my life. I want you to hold me accountable to this.
Yeah.
And so if you're unable to find it yourself, like find somebody in your life that can call you out on that and help guide you through that process. And again, it's a trust process. You're building trust. It's got to be somebody that you trust because they're going to come to you with some conviction and hopefully hold you accountable to it. But I mean, I can't think of a situation where I've asked a friend to kind of hold me accountable to something that they weren't like spot on with what I needed to hear through the entire process. Spot on. Yeah. It may hurt in the moment, but it was needed. Yeah. And they're doing it because they love you.
Yeah.
Yeah. They want the best of you.
Yeah. That's wonderful to hear. Anything else you want to add?
We could probably go on for.
I think we could go on for a long. Yeah. I know. As you speak, I think of more questions. So I think we've covered quite a pretty good swath here of being able to expand yourself or being able to help other people expand as well, which is kind of helps you also.
Yeah, and this isn't anybody kind of deal. Like there's nothing special about Charlie. There's some people that have been leaders in my life, but I mean they were average people. I mean they were some people will rise up and lead multi-trillion-dollar companies, but they started out, as just like a regular person that was willing to stretch themselves a little bit. And so,
well, and that's the point I was trying to make when you stink at something when you first do it. That's the same thing as I remember seeing. I've brought this up before, but my cousin became like what people would call a savant, like guitar player, my brother got a guitar. And my cousin saw it and just like fell in love, but he was 14 years old, 16 years old when that happened, and he stunk. And and so people see he's like, this, and I don't know the exact definition of savant, but it's like he's just born with this thing. It's like, no, he wasn't born with this thing. He literally asked his mom if he could homeschool, and so he began homeschooling so he could finish all of his classwork in a few hours, and he'd play guitar for like 14 to 16 hours a day, like
every day,
unbelievable. Like the determination is unbelievable.
Yep.
And so he comes out even 2 years later because he lived away from me. He came back and he was awesome. And then he moves away or whatever. And then within like 5 to 6 years, he's playing with lifelong guitar players who are like, I can't believe I'll ever be as good as he is, kind of thing. And there is, again, there's different caps that people will hit. But what I think people will forget is almost anybody can learn anything to an expert degree. You may not be the top 1% or the top of everything, but you can do things so incredibly to impress people or whatever you're going for. So that's why I don't want anyone to forget that. So if you pick up a guitar and whatever, you got fat hands and you're like, it just doesn't really work for me. I met another guitar player I couldn't believe he could make chords. His fingers were so round, like little sausages. I was like, how are you making chords? He's like, I don't know, it works. So anyways, so don't discourage yourself from failing on things. If you want something, it takes showing up and doing the work, just like you were saying, at a job. And you'll usually get that outcome you like. But
put in the time.
Yeah, for sure. All righty. Any closing words?
Oh, so thanks for having me. This is amazing. I'm glad that you're doing this. It's great for the community, and I'm sure if you look back on where you started and where you are now, you've probably grown a lot. And
I'm trying, people, just so anybody listening knows. I listen back on all of these, and if I don't take notes on paper, I'm taking notes in my head of how to change things. So you're free to comment. Just keep it kind of nice if you can. But thank you so much for coming out. It was a blast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right. Yep. Hey there. Thank you so much for listening. If you want more content from AK Blake, you can find me on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, all under the handles AK Blake. Or if you want to listen to more podcasts, anywhere you get your podcasts, it's there, Fairbanks, year-round. You may or may not know I am a local real estate agent here in Fairbanks with the Summit Realty Group. So if you like what I'm doing and you want to move to the area, you already live in the area, or you're looking to invest further into real estate in the area, you can reach me. Probably the best will be either my website, akblake.com, my email, blake@akblake.com, or my phone number is probably the fastest, 907-651-8356. You can call or text. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next one.